Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Jacob. If you are just joining me for the first time, you are welcome. Please kindly like this video and subscribe. If you are a returning subscriber, kindly give this video a like and also a comment. God bless you. Alright, so in this video, I'm going to explain the steps that are involved in developing an API. So developing an API involves several steps, and let's break them down. So from planning to designing to implementation to testing and deployment, let's break the processes down. The first step in the development of an API involves planning and requirement. In case you are wondering what is an API, in case this is your first time of seeing my video, in my previous video I talk about what an API is. I explain what an API is. You can see it in the description here. Alright, so the first step in designing an API involves planning and requirement gathering. Okay, so and the purpose is that you have to determine what the API is going to be used for and who is the target users or audience. Okay, then you have to define the requirement. What are the requirements for the API? Okay, what are they going to do? Okay, so like I said, the first thing is to determine who are the target audience or users. So once you define that, it simplifies the whole process. All right, so identify the requirement. What is it required? Okay, so you need to collect all the documents and the necessary information, and this can be what is the functionality, what is the performance, what's the security, and what's the scalability need. Okay, so this helps you to understand how the API, the steps to take in developing the API. Then you have to also know the type of API you are going to build. What type of API are you going to use? Is it a RESTful API? Okay, is it a GraphQL or API or SOAP? Okay, API. All of these are terms that I will explain in my next video. Just keep looking out for it. Alright, now the next step is designing API. Now, what are the steps in designing an API? The first time I said planning and requirement gathering. The second step is what? Is designing the API. So now that you have known who the user is, what are the things to put in place, the document and the type of API you're going to design. The second step is to design the API, and this is where you define the endpoint. And the endpoint literally is just the URL, and this URL, so they define the resources and the action of the API will provide. Okay, so you design the endpoint and the HTTP request hypertext transfer protocol, so which is the get, host, put, delete, the etc, the requests. All right, for each of them, is it going to be a get request, a post request, a put request, a delete request, a pass request, whatever it's going to be. So you need to understand, define that endpoint. What is that endpoint? What is the, how do you intend it to be? Then the second one is the data model. So you have your API, you have your data model. The data model has to do with the data that is going to be used with the API. Okay, so the data structure and the relationship between them. So if you are building an API that collects information from students, for example, so and you have student table and you have teachers table, you have teachers table and you have student table. So teachers should have access to all the students. Okay, except students that are not in this class. So you need to understand this relationship between tables in your database. All right, so this helps you to know the data model of your API. Now the next thing is authentication and accessibility or authorization. All right, so you need to decide on the method, okay, of authenticating. Are you going to use O authentication, JWT authentication, and the rest of them? And what authorization will be required for different endpoints? So for the get request, what authorization? For the post request, what authorization? For the put request, what authorization, and all of that. So you need to understand that. Then how are you going to handle errors? Okay, so you need to understand how you are going to handle the errors. So you define the strategy for handling errors and the return meaningful error messages. Okay, so if a user is supposed to put a date and is putting an invalid in numbers, okay, and it's not in a date format. Okay, so you need to understand how you are going to handle this error. Then versioning, so you need to know where you are going to deploy your code. So plan for API versioning to handle future changes, okay, without breaking existing clients. Okay, so decide on that. Then prototype. Okay, so what this means is that you need to have a prototype. Okay, create a prototype, build a simple version of the API to test the basic functionality of the API. Okay, so the design if necessary. All right, so you need to put that into check. So build a simple version of the API to test the basic functionality and the design, okay, of your choice. Now, the next thing you need to know under the prototype, which is a third in the steps in developing an API, is the feedback. So you need to get feedback from users, okay, from potential users, from stakeholders, and iterate, okay, iterate back. Look at what you've done and iterate. All right. So this helps you to make a necessary adjustments and put the right thing in place. Then implementation. All right. So implementation is the first step in the steps involved in developing an API. All right. And this involves setting up the environment. Okay. So what environment are you going to use? So you need to choose the programming language, the framework, and the tools. Okay. Are you going to use Postman? Are you going to use Python? Are you going to use Java? Are you going to use Node.js? So you need to know the kind of environment you are going to use and the programming languages you are going to use. Then coding. So you start implementing the API endpoint, data model, authentication, and all the necessary schemas and connections that is needed. All right. So this helps you to have a very well-defined processes of your implementing your API. Then database integration. So you need to integrate your database to your backend. All right. So integrate the database if required. Yes, it's required if you are collecting data. But if you are not collecting any data and you are not storing and retrieving data, then you don't need a database. But if you are storing and retrieving data, you need a database. So you need to understand, you need to get to integrate your database and set up the necessary schemas and connections. All right. Then you need to document your API. All right. So under the implementation, you need to document your API endpoint. Okay, the request and the response format, the authentication method, and the usage example. So this helps you to write a more robust API. Testing. Okay, so you need to perform a unit test, write test for individual components and functions of your API. Integrate testing. All right, test the integration between different components of the API. Okay, then performance testing, ensure that the API meet the required performance benchmark. Okay, so then security testing, user testing. So you need to perform all of these tests to put this in check. Then deployment. So you prepare the deployment environment. Okay, so set up your server or cloud infrastructure, whether you're using Azure, AWS, Google GCP, Google Cloud, whatever you're going to do. Okay, so you need to prepare the deployment environment. Then the next one is deploy the API. Okay, so deploy the API to the production environment. Then monitor the whole process. So they set up monitoring and logging to track the API performance and error. So you can use something like Centric. Okay, Centric. So to monitor the errors and the error log and whatever that is happening with the API. Then maintenance. So you need to fix the bugs and updates. All right. So you need to fix the bug and update regular fix bug and make necessary updates to improve scalability and all. Okay. So then you need to also handle the scalability aspect, where you handle the load balancing, where there are too much requests, what happens. So you need to understand your load balancing. Then update your documentation. All right. Update your documentation. Okay, and that is the final steps in API development. So if you are asking the question, what are the steps involved in developing an API? I have just explained the 7 steps that is involved in developing an API. Don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to comment. I want to hear from you. What do you think? Subscribe and thank you for watching. Bye bye.